There is an 80-20 as a natural rule in nature, and I believe the same applies to the project manager role. That means that there are 20% of the activities that a project manager can do in order to get 80% of the output. The 80-20 of the project manager role involves playing to the strengths of their team and minimizing their weaknesses. The following is a list of quick wins. I list 5 things that I observed in my 20 years of software development and also project management that really moved the needle for the PM role. What I believe is the core principle here is that great project managers really support their developers. That means they really understand what is the technical task at hand, and they really figure out ways where they can fill in the gaps where the software developers don't have time for. But what does really caring actually mean? Well, it means having awareness of what the developers can do and what they cannot do. It means knowing what their strengths are and what their weaknesses are, and then minimizing the weaknesses and sometimes even doing the work for them and having them play to their strengths. The first thing project managers can do in order to support the developers is helping them figure out the critical path and showing them the way what needs to get done. And the critical path is the whole journey from where users start to where it ends. It's all the things in between, all the hard things that the software needs to get done in order to be actually fulfilling the purpose. It is not auxiliary systems that can be built later and so on. It's the main thing, the core functionality, the core problem that the software is going to solve. So this critical path, something that the developers should focus on first. And as a project manager, it's about us to prioritize for them, to help them see this is the current thing they're working on, but then there are other ones that are following after that. Now that's the thing with focus. Per definition, the word means only caring about one thing and not caring about anything else that's right now going on. And so the job of the PM is to show that there's a critical path of one thing that we need to focus on now, and then also the next things the developer needs to focus on. Because if the project manager wouldn't do that, the developer would easily derail and look into the next solution that's interesting, which might not be on the critical path. So the job of the PM is to figure out that path and see what are the next things that need to get done in order to get to the milestone, and also do the trade-offs. Of course, that needs to be in discussion with the developers, but basically there is always some kind of trade-off, some things we cannot deal with right now that need to get done later. And these are the jobs that the project manager needs to do in order to focus the developer down to the most important thing. And additionally, nudge the developer if they're deviating from the path. The next important thing is shielding communication. I've seen this time and time again, where a project manager would CC some developers just to cover their ass. Basically just to make sure that they're playing it safe, that whatever decision has been taken, developers knows and they silently approve of that. And I think that's a mistake. Developers should get brought in only for critical questions, and ideally only in certain meetings where they discuss things. When the developer can work on code, just leave them alone. Don't nudge them too much. Don't ping them too much in Slack or in MetaMost, and don't write them too many emails. Let them do the work, and this is the job of the PM, to get the communication out of their way. Now that's the thing with developers. They work according to the maker schedule, which means large blocks of time uninterrupted. And project managers work according to the manager schedule. And that's an article written by Paul Graham, which I can refer you to. He discusses how it would affect if you take a maker schedule and insert meetings into that. So basically, for every meeting that you insert into a large block of time, you're not taking away the time from the meeting. You're taking away some boundaries, some padding around that meeting as well. So if you have a day of 8 hours uninterrupted, you insert one meeting, you don't suddenly have like 3 and 4 and then 1 hour meeting in the middle. You take away much more. You be left with maybe 2 times 2 hours. And that's something project managers need to understand whenever they're getting into communication with the developers and asking for their time. And of course, project managers should not just play it safe and CC developers all the time just to make sure that they get the information. If they need an information, send it to them in a user story or send them an explicit email or discuss things in the meeting. But don't just CC someone in order to have some silent acceptance. These are bad practices I've seen project managers do, and they should be avoided. And the third thing is to go a bit more technical. I've seen a couple of project managers who always said they wanted to learn coding, but they eventually never do. But it could be so easy. Just go into some JavaScript playground online and just play around with some routines, or learn the basics of user interfaces, or learn the basics of database design, All these things would really help to talk the language of the developer and help to understand what they're going through. And this is even more important when actually working at tickets together. Because product managers who are really great, they understand a bit of the underlying tech of a ticket. And I've seen other project managers who just completely neglect what's going on there and just see the ticket as something which has a deadline and a story point and an assignee and some wireframes maybe. And I think this is a mistake. A PM should always try to understand at least a bit of a ticket, because that would help them also figure out the project in the big picture. It would figure out what's the critical path. It would figure out what are the things that we actually need to do and what are the hard things in a project. Going a bit more technical always pays off. And one thing that's, I think, obvious, but people often don't apply it, is that developers love to help. Just asking them a question about some basics. Hey, can you explain to me database indexes? Those small things would really help the friendship between developers and product managers, and I would love to see that being applied more. And let's talk about testing. Testing is important, and usually in every software project, tests are being written and tests are being performed by people. And usually this involves some kind of product owner or some QA person. The project managers usually also test, but I encourage them to test even more, because there's one advantage of if the project manager tests with the developers or very closely with the developers, which is feedback time. A project manager works closer to the developers, meaning when they test a feature, they can give feedback faster, and they can even take away some uncomfortable situations when a half-baked feature gets shipped to the product owner. I really believe this is the highest ROI activity, software testing, because it doesn't just give feedback to the developer and ensures the quality of the software, it also helps the PM to understand what this is about and understand the edge cases and actually see what is necessary in order to ship this thing. Is there something missing? Is there something that the developers did differently from the specification? All these things pop up during testing. So testing is the highest ROI activity for a product manager. And there's another thing about developers I want to share here, is that they don't like to set deadlines, but they love to work against deadlines. Now this comes back to the incentivization of developers, because a developer is not incentivized to set a deadline and then fulfill it, because they could only lose. What if something is not done and they have to go over the deadline? Or what if they ship something that has bugs because they needed to ship it in front of the deadline? So that's something that the developers naturally don't like to do. But they love to work against deadlines if the whole team is with them together. So as a PM, another good ROI activity is actually to set deadlines and to get everybody aligned on them. What makes a good deadline? Of course, it should be realistic. The developer actually needs to be able to do that, and then the whole team needs to be involved. A developer who's working alone against the deadline, that's not really good, because then they feel alone, they feel like some arbitrary person wanted something from them. But if the whole team is aligned, everybody works together, that's when the real power is unfolded. Personally, I'm also a friend of sub-deadlines, meaning if we have certain check-in points before we ship a big thing, and ideally even going live with those sub-deadlines. Going live with something, meaning there will be more testing, and we also have an excuse to ship something that's not totally perfect yet. Because if we have that, then we can fix things later. We can have the freedom of actually seeing what needs to get done in order to make the big thing later on. In our projects, we try to go live as early as possible and ship things in sub-deadlines so that we get feedbacks from the client and the whole quality of the software is better. I believe these are the 5 things that give you the most bang for the buck, and I would love to know from you. Is there something that I missed in this list? Please leave a comment below.